Hey friends, it's Chris from chrisbeatcancer.com. So every 2 years, the American Cancer Society publishes a report called Cancer Stats and Statistics, where they basically are sharing all the numbers and evaluating the current state of cancer, cancer treatment, survival, etc. Now I want you to see this report and I want to talk about it because the way they present the information is very misleading. But the truth is also in there. They just have twisted it. So let's take a look. I'm going to do a little screen share here, and we'll go to the American Cancer Society website. Okay, hopefully you can see that. Sometimes it's blurry when we do this on Google+, but here we are, American Cancer Society, the official sponsor of birthdays, trademark, Life After Cancer, Survivorship by the Numbers. Okay, I'm going to read a couple little parts of this and then we'll get into it. So first of all, the American Cancer Society defines a cancer survivor as anyone who has been diagnosed with cancer and is still alive. Okay, hold that thought. Now, here's their pronouncement. More Americans than ever are surviving cancer. According to Cancer Treatment Survivorship Facts and Figures 2014 to 2015, there are 14.5 million cancer survivors alive in the U.S. today, and that number is expected to grow to almost 19 million by 2024. This growth is due, in part, to improvements in both detection and treatment, so they say. Though there are still hurdles in the fight against cancer, these statistics show the great progress that has been made in helping people with cancer. Now, here's the chart. We see between 1970 and 1975, you see this upward trend in the amount of cancer survivors predicted to be, somewhere around 19 million in 2025. Okay, so far this seems really good. They put a really positive spin on this information. Wow, look at the amount of survivors. It's really growing. That's terrific, right? That must mean that the cancer industry is really making great progress, as they claim right here. Okay, now again, what is a cancer survivor? It's someone who has been diagnosed and is still alive. So if you were diagnosed yesterday, guess what? You are in the survivor club, and they can count you as a survivor. Now, let's go to the National Cancer Institute. This is the SEER data, Surveillance, Epidemiology, and End Results Program. This is for all cancers. If we scroll down right here to this chart, you'll see a couple very interesting things. This is from 1975 to 2001, and this green line represents the new cancer cases. That's people that are diagnosed with cancer. So this is about 400 for every 100,000 people were diagnosed with cancer in the United States. And you can see this upward trend since 1975. And it does go to 2011 right there. Now, it peaked right here. This was in the early 90s. One of the reasons it peaked is because this is when the use of hormone replacement therapy for women peaked. And a report came out in the early 90s that demonstrated that hormone replacement therapy was leading to cancers, and there was a sharp decline in the use of hormone replacement therapy, a very steep drop right here, and less people were diagnosed with cancer. There's also been a very, very significant decrease in the amount of men who smoke, and so smoking-related cancers and deaths have declined. So those are the two biggest impact factors in the decline in cancer since the early 90s. Okay, but here's where the truth comes into play. Remember, the American Cancer Society is saying the survivor trend is really growing. And you see this huge trend here, right? From 3 million survivors now to 15 million, eventually 20 million. But what does this chart really mean? This chart really means these are people who've been diagnosed with cancer. This chart could also be interpreted as the number of people diagnosed with cancer is exploding, right? This is the same information phrased in a different way. They put a positive spin on it, calling it cancer survivors, but the truth is this is cancer diagnosis. Back to the National Cancer Institute. So the true measure of progress is not in the amount of diagnosis, right? The measure of progress is in the reduction of death from cancer. So how have we done? Well, here's the cancer death trend since 1975, and you see here is about 200 per 100,000 people, and then today it's down a little bit, okay? So not a huge drop here, not a huge reduction. I wouldn't call this great progress, because despite the amount of information about diagnosis, we've made very little progress in the death rate. So back to this again, cancer incidence is exploding. Why are there so many more survivors? Because cancer survivors, cancer incidence, people are being diagnosed with cancer at 2 to 3 times the rate of the number of deaths. So of course the quote-unquote survivorship is exploding, because exponentially every year when you have 2 to 3 times as many people diagnosed than the number of people that die, yeah, it's gonna have this huge upward trend. Kabam, right there. Now, let's look at 5-year survival. This is since 1975. In 1975, it was 48.7% of the people. To 2006, I don't know why they don't bring it to 2011 in this chart, but anyway, it's still really relatively about the same today, around 68% overall for all cancers, 5-year survival. Obviously, some cancers do better, some are much worse. The best cancers are going to be testicular cancer and some lymphomas and leukemia. The worst would be pancreatic lung cancer. And of course, the leading causes of cancer death are lung cancer, colon cancer, breast cancer. Those are the top 3. Okay, most common and most common cancer deaths. So there appears to be a very significant improvement in the 5-year survival. And you hear this touted a lot. Well, cancer patients are living longer than ever, and 5-year survival has gone way up. You hear this from the industry all the time, and you hear it in the media. Yeah, 48% up to 68%, that's about a 50% increase in survival. That seems huge. But this is funny math, because you have to understand what's driving these figures. Since 1975, there's been a huge boom in early diagnosis, right? Women getting mammograms, men getting prostate exams. And so they've diagnosed a lot more people. And when you catch cancer earlier, guess what? People live with it longer, and it makes the 5-year survival look better. So if you have 100 women that never went to the doctor and found a breast lump, well, that's typically going to be stage 2 or 3 by the time they find it themselves. If they go get a mammogram, it might detect it at stage 0 or stage 1, which means they will live with it longer. They know they have it longer, and even when they die, the 5-year survival looks better because they knew about it longer. And how we know this is sort of funny math is because if this was really a legitimate figure as to the state of cancer treatment, that it was actually saving lives, that early detection saves lives, then we would see a huge drop in the number of deaths, right? We've got a huge increase in 5-year survival. Where's the huge drop? 50% if it was equal to the 5-year survival rates. Where is it? Well, it's not there. Now we see the downward trend since the early 90s, which I mentioned earlier, because largely in part to the reduction in smoking among men for the most part, and the reduction in the use of hormone replacement therapy in women. So we see a slight declining trend here since the early 90s, which is definitely positive, but the cancer industry cannot take credit for this. So now let's go here. You want to go further back in time. This is to 1975. Let's go back to 1950. Look, this is from the CDC, okay? Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. 1950, the cancer death rate was 193. That's basically 194 people for every 100,000 people. You can see it peaked dramatically in the early 90s, like I said, and then since then has come down to 2004 here to 185. Now, really want to go to the data? This is the CDC again. 1950. Here is the cancer death rate, 193.9. This is malignant neoplasms, that's cancer. all the way across here, 2010, it's 172.8. So this is the most current data we've got. The cancer death rate has come down since 1950 about 10%. So 60 years, and the overall reduction in the death rate is 10%, which is pretty lousy. For some cancers, and by the way, that's if you average them all together. So they've made huge improvements in a few cancers and very little improvements in epithelial cancers, which are carcinomas, which make up 80% of cancers: breast cancer, colon cancer, lung cancer, liver, brain, head and neck cancers, etc. Those are the major cancer killers, and we've made very little progress. So the progress they've made with lymphomas, leukemia, and testicular have skewed the numbers. It made the overall cancer numbers look better than they really are for the vast majority. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Okay, back to this one more time, just so you understand. In 2013, there were 1.6 million new diagnoses of cancer, and there were 580,000 deaths, right? So 3 times as many people were diagnosed with cancer than died, which is why we're getting this huge upward trend. Look, this is scary, right? This is not good news. This is bad news. This means that the diagnosis and incidence of cancer is exploding, and the ability to treat cancer and cure cancer with conventional methods has barely changed, if you even give any credit to them at all. Now, the last point I'm going to make here may be the biggest. This figure, the cancer death rate on the national level, is a very, very unreliable rate. The numbers are very unreliable because the cancer death rate comes from death certificates from hospitals all over the country. And the problem is that many cancer patients, when they die, they are not attributed to, their cause of death is not attributed to cancer. Now, let me explain. If someone is diagnosed with cancer and they have surgery and they die on the operating table, they're not going to be listed as a cancer death. They're going to be listed as, surgical morbidity, or if they die within 30 to 60 days from a complication from surgery, from an infection or whatever, that would be like post-surgical morbidity. It's not going to be listed as cancer, but they had the surgery because of cancer, right? So they really are a cancer death, but it's not listed as a cancer death. Then you take the group of cancer patients that have been treated with chemotherapy and radiation, and many of them die from secondary infections. As many as 60% of them die from infections related to a suppressed immune system that was destroyed by chemotherapy. A very significant number of them die from kidney failure, renal failure, from liver failure, from heart disease and or heart attacks, right? Heart failure, chemotoxicity. Many of these causes of death are not listed as cancer being the primary cause on their death certificate. So they're not being reported correctly to, into the national database of cause of death. And based on this, by the way, there have been several studies trying to put together, obviously reporting on this problem, but also trying to put together a realistic figure, and no one really can. Because in order to do that, you would have to go and audit every single death certificate from every person who was diagnosed with cancer. That's a lot of manpower. It's 580,000 people to start with that were quote-unquote died of cancer. We know about them, but then all the other people that died that were diagnosed, which is 1.6 million people diagnosed last year, right? So over 1 million people dying every year, auditing every birth certificate to figure out, wait a minute, did they actually have cancer, and was it recorded as a cancer death or something else? So it's an insurmountable problem, but the truth is cancer is the #1 cause of death in the United States. It's not heart disease. And it may be, we don't even know how big the number is. It's almost impossible to figure this out. But we know it's a lot bigger than what's being reported. So you can verify this on your own. If you know anyone who has died of cancer and you have the ability to find out what was listed as the cause of death on their death certificate, just ask. Maybe it was a family member or something. If it's not too awkward, ask, and you will see it probably was not listed as cancer. Now, the most ridiculous one I've heard was from my friend Jeannie, who told me she said her father died of cancer, and the death certificate said failure to thrive. That was listed as the cause of death. So there you go. Probably the most ridiculous cause of death description I've ever heard. Failure to thrive. So anyway, thanks for watching. Please share this video. Subscribe to my YouTube channel. This is really important information, and I think everyone needs to know the way these statistics and numbers are being manipulated is very serious, and we need to get the word out. Thanks.